Welcome to today's webinar. County Health Rankings and Roadmaps is a program of the University of Wisconsin Population Health Institute. This webinar is brought to you thanks to the contributions of colleagues and partners in Wisconsin and across the nation, with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It is produced in collaboration with Healthy Places by Design, an organization that advances community-led action and proven strategies to ensure health and well-being for all. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejope since time immemorial. UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. This webinar will be recorded. All speakers' views are their own. Guest bios and slides from today's webinar are available on our resource page. We will share a link to the resource page when the webinar begins. Stay up to date on all things CHRNR. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you haven't already, sign up for our newsletter by scanning this QR code with your phone's camera. It's the best way to find out about upcoming webinars, our podcast, and our latest tools and resources. Your facilitators today include our host, Erica Burrows-Girardi, with support from CHRNR Communications Specialist, Colleen Wick, and the Collaborative Learning Director from Healthy Places by Design, Joanne Lee. We invite you to continue the conversation immediately after the webinar in our discussion group. Joanne Lee will be our lead facilitator. And watch for a chat from Colleen for details on how to join the group after the webinar.
Welcome to Storytelling as a Tool to Increase Voter Participation. Hi, my name is Erica Burrows-Girardi. CHRNR webinars reflect the values we hold as part of the University of Wisconsin Population Health Institute. Values of collaboration, integrity, excellence, innovation, inclusion, and courage. These are the values that we aim to model during the webinar, and we hope that you will too. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to the team that's going to aid in your learning experience. And let's start with Joanne Lee with Healthy Places by Design. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Erica, and hello to everybody in our webinar audience. So glad that many of you have joined us today for this exciting topic. We invite you to join the conversation and engage with us during the webinar. And there's two ways to engage. I'm going to tell you about how you can use the Q&A box. As the name implies, if you have questions for our presenters during the webinar, you can put them in the Q&A box anytime. So Q&A is for questions for our presenters, and during the section that we have carved out to field your questions, we will answer as many as possible. There's another way that you can engage in the webinar, and that's via the group chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Colleen Wick to tell you how you can use the chat today.
Thanks, Joanne. Hi, everyone. Like Joanne said, I will meet you in the chat. So use the chat to share knowledge or respond to questions that we may ask you during the webinar. Please join us in making the chat a welcoming space by adhering to a few guidelines we have for you. So use the chat to share successes, lessons learned, relevant resources, and links. But please make sure to engage in respectful dialogue. As you could see, our chat conversations tend to be very engaging. So if they're too distracting for you, simply close the chat window in Zoom. Please also know that the views expressed by speakers and participants are their own. They do not represent CHRNR or Healthy Places by Design. Again, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box. And now I will pass it on to our technologist, James Lloyd.
Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much, and hello, everybody else. I work with County Health Rankings and Roadmaps as a technology coordinator, and I'm here today to make sure that our webinar goes as smooth as possible from a technical standpoint. So if you are having issues, reach out to me in the Q&A pod, and I'll see what I can do to make sure you have a fantastic experience. So with that, Erica, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, James. And thanks to the entire production team. You guys are awesome. This year we've talked a lot about civic participation. Why is that? Well, because people and places thrive when everyone can participate. And voting is one of the best ways to participate in decisions that is going to affect your health. And there's no better time to discuss voting and why it matters to your health than on National Voter Registration Day, which is today. This is a nonpartisan civic holiday to celebrate our democracy. When you vote, you support democracy. Voting is both powerful and empowering. That is why we want to spend some time today talking about a strategy to encourage voter participation. Now, there are many ways that we can encourage people to engage, but today we're going to focus on storytelling. Stories link movements to narratives, which hold power, and it places storytelling at the center of social change. Everyone's story matters. And here to discuss why voting matters and how storytelling can help improve voter participation is Dr. Mahs. She's a she's a partnerships director for Healthy Democracy, Healthy People, and also join me in welcoming Anicia Santos, a solutions architect with the global public health organization called Resolve to Save Lives. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Erica, for having us.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Nora. Excited to be here.
Thank you. After today's webinar, we're going to hold a discussion group to unpack what you heard today. So please plan to continue the discussion with us. During the video intro, you heard about our discussion groups that follow the webinar. They're facilitated by Joanne, always engaging, giving you the opportunity to share and learn from others. Colleen's going to chat out information at the end of the webinar so you can link to that discussion group. And then look for this webinar's resource guide, including links from CHRNR, links our guests have shared with you, and relevant links shared by your peers in the discussion group. That resource guide will be emailed later this week. Now I want to invite Nora back. And Nora, we know that voting is one of the best ways that we can, like act on our values, have a say in our future. But how is voting tied to our health?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking that question. Healthy democracy, healthy people sees health and democracy as interdependent, which is also confirmed by research. The short answer is that higher civic and voter participation is correlated with better health outcomes for people and communities, and lower civic participation is correlated with worse health outcomes. One rationale for how voting is tied to health is through the understanding of power being a root cause for influencing policies that can advance health and racial equity. A great definition of power comes from Martin Luther King Jr., which is power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, or economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of love and justice. In this sense, we can see civic and voter participation being key to building collective power across and with our communities. One way power manifests is through civic and voter participation. In a democracy, we can directly influence policies when we vote on ballot measures like funding for parks, education, transportation, etc. We also vote for elected officials who are tasked with representing our interests in the policymaking process. Therefore, whose interests are reflected in these policy decisions is often tied to voting and the policies that either enable or hinder community members to participate. Communities with more power through voting can advocate for healthier conditions. Historical and contemporary research confirms that when we have higher rates of civic and voter participation, communities are healthier. Thus, healthy communities are also more likely to have higher voter participation, making this a continuous and virtuous cycle. We also know the opposite is true. where communities with less civic and voter participation, often due to governing structures that make it harder to participate, have less power to influence, which reinforces worse health outcomes because the policies do not reflect the needs of the communities. Thus, this feedback loop reinforces health inequities. We have historical examples of how collective power has made our democracy more inclusive and led to positive community health outcomes. Whenever we have expanded the electorate or worked to ensure our democracy is more inclusive, we have seen improvements in health and social determinants. For example, when women gained the right to vote, they were able to use their influence to ensure legislative bodies were more responsive to women's concerns, making investments to improve maternal and child health. And studies show that child mortality rates actually declined. All of these steps forward on this table are examples of just that, steps forward. But we know that each step has been met with contention, and we cannot sit out and achieve our aims. And we have to recognize that we have a constant, continuous struggle for power. While these examples use historical data, we also have more contemporary examples, like with research from the Health and Democracy Index.
Yeah, I love how you started to weave in that historical background, because that makes a difference, right? It kind of sets us up for how we got here. But tell us a little bit more about the Health and Democracy Index, because you guys have some really cool data that can help people understand just that correlation you were telling us between health and voting.
Yeah. So in 2021, Healthy Democracy, Healthy People started exploring this relationship, first by reviewing existing literature. And we found that the research at the time was mostly limited to historical data, like the studies I shared, and international studies. So we conducted an analysis to measure the ease or restrictiveness of electoral policies across 12 public health indicators, which include things like self-reported health, premature mortality, infant mortality, and so on, and found that states with more voting access and greater civic participation have better health outcomes. For example, in 2020, the 10 healthiest states, out of the 10 healthiest states, 8 restore voting rights to those convicted of a felony. By contrast, of the 10 least healthy states, only 1 allows for such restoration. Similarly, the 10 healthiest states all have programs that make it easy for eligible voters to register, like same day or automatic voter registration. Of the 10 least healthiest states, only 2 have such programs. This is a screenshot from the index that shows our key finding. It shows all 50 states as the little boxes on the graph. On the horizontal or x-axis, we have voting access, which is measured by the cost of voting index. On one side, we have less voting access, and on the other side, we have more voting access. The vertical or y-axis is overall state level health, and the relationship is very clear. States with more voting access and greater civic participation have better health outcomes, and states that face significant barriers to voting suffer from worse health outcomes.
And I just want to let folks know you will have a link to this in the resource guide that you're going to receive later this week, because I know you're dying to check out where your state is located. So we will make sure that you have access to that.
Yeah. Um, And these findings have also been replicated in peer-reviewed studies, showing that where it's easier to vote, we have better overall health, even across a 25-year time period, lower uninsured rates, lower county COVID case and mortality rates. And we know that when young people vote early in life, they have better future income, education, and mental health.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these studies. It shows why civic participation is important, and I think it's important that people know that voting is tied to our health. So thank you so much for um, for sharing that. In April, some of you who are regular guests in our webinars, you might remember Dr. Stella Sappho. She's the Executive Director of Civic Health Alliance, and she joined us in April in a webinar called Exploring Strategies to Strengthen Civic Participation for Communities' Health. And during that webinar, Dr. Sappho introduced our audience to the Thrive Through Civic Health We Will Vote initiative. Nora, you all are very much involved in this initiative. Can you remind us what the initiative is about?
Yeah, absolutely. The Thrive Through Civic Health We Will Vote initiative is a joint initiative launched by Civic Health Alliance, Vote ER, and Healthy Democracy, Healthy People. The initiative, which launched in February, serves as an invitation for health organizations and health professionals to act as civic health champions and commit to voting in every election we are eligible to. We came together because health professionals represent 22 million workers nationwide, which is 14% of the US workforce. In comparison, auto workers are only 3 million people, and public school teachers are less than 3 million nationwide. In 2020, we had record voter participation, and yet 1 in 3 eligible voters did not cast a ballot. What's more surprising and concerning is that studies show that healthcare workers are 12 to 23% less likely to vote than the general population. We know health professionals are spread incredibly thin, and we need to organize to ensure we vote. Thrive Through Civic Health, We Will Vote serves as a call to action for health professionals and their organizations to promote nonpartisan voter participation with colleagues, members, and the communities that we serve. We are working together to build power and influence aimed at advancing health equity by expanding the understanding of the relationship between voting and health. One way we are working to build power across the health sector is inviting health organizations to serve as civic health champions by making a commitment to encourage nonpartisan voter participation. And we are continuing to encourage organizations to join the initiative. On this slide, you can see the commitment our partner organizations have made. It's pretty simple. As a leading health organization, we commit to strengthening our democracy by encouraging nonpartisan voter participation across our memberships, employees, and affiliates. We continue to welcome additional partners to the initiative, and if you'd like to share the commitment form across your organizational leaders, you can access the form using the QR code, and a link will be shared in the resource guide that will be shared after this session. Currently, the initiative has over 70 health partners nationwide that have made this commitment and represent over 120,000 health professionals across the country.
That is so encouraging and exciting. And, I did not realize that those of us in public health and healthcare represent 14% of the workforce. That's surprising to me, but I'm glad that you all are doing this. Now, let's talk about what resources and toolkits are involved to help engage participants.
Yeah, there are several resources to support engaging health professionals in nonpartisan civic and voter participation. 3 resources I want to talk about today include a pledge to vote, a voter education hub, and a storytelling toolkit. The first step for individuals to join the We Will Vote initiative is by committing to vote by pledging to vote. We know that when people commit to voting, they are much more likely to get out and vote come election day. We'll also be sending reminders to folks who take the pledge by making sure they are vote ready. Additionally, voting is a complex process, and the number one reason people don't vote, including the reason why health professionals don't vote, is that they aren't registered or they had trouble navigating the process. So one resource we are using to encourage voting is a one-stop shop landing page for voters to find critical elections information. Using the QR code on this slide, you can find resources to update or check your voter registration, request an absentee ballot, or just see what elections are happening in your community. As I mentioned, we've also launched the storytelling component of the initiative. And on this slide is a preview of what's included in our comprehensive toolkit that we created in partnership with Public Health Awaken and Narratives for Health Civic Health Action Group. It's designed to walk you through every step of creating and sharing your voting story. Everyone has a story to tell, and that story is important. Whether it's about voting, how voting has impacted your community, or why democracy is essential for your health. These stories make the connection between voter participation and the well-being of our communities. But we also know it's not always easy to share your story. That's why we created the storytelling toolkit, to make it easy and impactful for you to find and tell your story about why democracy matters to you and your community's health. It starts with reflection questions to help you connect your personal experience as a public health professional to the importance of voting, and guides you from reflection to a personalized script. We've even included template scripts that you can personalize to make crafting your story easier, along with example scripts to give you inspiration. We've included 4 different approaches you may take in crafting your story, including a general public health perspective, speaking from your personal values, moving from apathy to action, and supporting a local ballot initiative. Telling your story is important, but who you share it with is just as crucial. The storytelling toolkit is part of a larger movement to use our stories through video to inspire action and promote voter participation. The We Will Vote initiative is all about building our collective power to promote voter participation and health equity. Again, with 22 million health professionals, we have the potential to be a powerful voting bloc with the power to shape the policies that impact public health. We will use your story as part of a larger narrative campaign. These videos will be shared via social media and email, specifically targeting public health professionals to highlight the critical role democracy plays in advancing health equity. We're also encouraging everyone to share their stories with personal networks and organizations to inspire even more people to take action and commit to voting this year. And we've included some guidance in our toolkit for that as well.
That is it sounds like fun, first of all. But it's also exciting. I love how you are making just the action of telling your story super easy. And we're talking about how storytelling is a strategy that connects and motivates action, right? Tell us a little bit more why stories are so important and why they play a critical role in moving people forward.
Yeah. So there are 2 ways that we understand the world. One is through our head, and we think of that through strategy and analysis. So you can think of the Health and Democracy Index as a nice head example of understanding the world. And through our heart, through story and motivation. In order to enable others to achieve a shared purpose, we must use both the head and the heart. And stories are the heart. Having the best strategy in the world doesn't matter if we're not motivated to implement it and we can't get anyone to join us. One great example of how personal stories have been used to move others to action is the story of Edie and Thea's very long engagement. They told their love story, which helped humanize LGBTQ people and inspired people to take action to support the freedom to marry. Stories have been used to humanize issues and move people towards action on a range of important issues, from reproductive rights, climate action, immigration reform, and gun violence prevention. Stories move us to action by engaging our emotions. Emotions tell us about what we value in the world. What are the things that bring you joy and hope? What makes you feel angry? When we hear stories that make us feel a certain way, those stories remind us of our core values, and we experience our values through those emotions. Stories are also a tool that we can use as leaders to move ourselves and our people from feelings of stagnation to motivation. So you can see on this slide, we can move from inertia to urgency, from apathy to anger, from fear to hope, from isolation to solidarity, and from self-doubt to you can make a difference.
And how can stories dispel dominant narratives that reinforce the status quo or like fuel stereotypes that create inequities?
Yeah. So to answer that, we need to recognize that dominant narratives shape how we interpret reality and influence public consciousness. Narratives are not just isolated messages you drop in your press release. They are values-based themes that shape our worldview, including how we interpret reality and influence public consciousness. In this way, they inform our strategy, who we partner with, what we advocate for, and how you write your press release, etc. They often function like the air we breathe or the ocean we swim in, invisible yet deeply influential. As a result, they can amplify inequities and reinforce stereotypes. Personal storytelling is one powerful way to challenge dominant narratives and inspire others to join us, and to change the narrative about the role of health professionals in promoting civic health. It can humanize an experience, shift perspective, and foster a more inclusive understanding of our communities. We want to show that health professionals do vote, should vote, and can influence the policies that shape the health and well-being of our communities. For example, a key dominant narrative that reinforces the status quo or fuels stereotypes that create inequities is the myth of individual responsibility. This narrative suggests that health outcomes are solely the result of individual choices and overlooks influential systemic factors. It reinforces the idea that those who struggle with health issues simply haven't tried hard enough, which perpetuates stigma and inequities. As health professionals, we have a responsibility to offer an alternative, more more transformative narrative that fights back against this dominant narrative. We can inform our communities and networks that health outcomes are influenced by a complex interplay of social determinants. It shifts the focus from blaming individuals to understanding the systemic barriers that affect their choices. The next slide will delve into the contrast between dominant narratives and alternative narratives that promote equity and inclusion. So on this slide, there's a table that highlights some common dominant narratives surrounding voting, such as the belief that voting is solely an individual act or that elections do not matter. Each narrative highlights a limiting perspective that can discourage civic participation. These narratives are widespread and often shape our understanding and actions related to civic engagement. To counter these limiting beliefs, we must introduce alternative narratives that open up possibilities for new solutions and perspectives. We can challenge these narratives by sharing personal stories that illustrate alternatives, perspectives, emphasizing the collective importance of voting for community health, the need for accessible ballots, and the impact of our vote in shaping policies. By harnessing the power of storytelling, we can transform these dominant narratives, inspire others to engage in the voting process, and ultimately strengthen our collective voice in the We Will Vote initiative. So to share an example, and here is a form that you'll fill out as you submit your story.
And one of the things I wanted to say, Nora, is I love how the storytelling weaves in that narrative and actually puts it together so people can really understand the importance. I love what you said, how it ties the knowledge to the heart. It's that link that's so important that actually motivates action. And you have an example you're going to share with us.
Yeah, so just to share an example of how stories can be used to challenge these dominant narratives, I'd also like to show Anicia Santos's story, who joined our first storytelling workshop.
James is
And I bel-
queuing that up for us. It's fine.
Hi, I'm Anicia, and this November I'm committed to voting because public health is on the ballot. I believe voting is an act of collective care and one way to combat the systemic oppression that makes our community a target. I want to do everything I can to contribute to the well-being of our community. And when I vote, I know it's just one of the ways to make sure I'm actively helping to shape access and possibility in the future of our community. Our votes have the power to dictate where our tax dollars are spent, whether they make accessing healthcare easier or they go towards expanding the carceral system. Our vote decides whether we have cleaner air and safer water or whether corporations are allowed to do more and more damage to our local environments. By voting, we are creating more opportunities for better health outcomes for everyone. In my community, when we organized and turned out voters in 2020, we saw Measure J pass, which reallocates county money to be spent on social services like housing and mental health treatment instead of on jails and prisons. So let's come together and show our power at the polls. Check your voter registration, get registered if you're not, and get your ballot in. Together, we can change what our community invests in and what we divest from, and build a healthier, more resilient future for us all.
Thanks for sharing that, James. Nora, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is like when you put the story toolkit, the toolkit together, how did you do that? Like, who was involved in that effort? This seems like it was really a major undertaking.
Yeah, so we partnered with Public Health Awakens Election Work Group, which actually has a sub work group focused on narrative change. And then we also partnered um, with the Narratives for Change Civic Health Action Group to help inform the story toolkit and help make sure that it flowed well, that folks didn't have questions when they left the storytelling toolkit, and that we were really creating something that was comprehensive while also not overwhelming. So
Yeah.
it's been a great collaboration.
It has, and I have to admit that I was part of it too. I'm a little proud of the fact that I was invited to help vet the storytelling toolkit, and it was a lot of fun. Didn't write it. That definitely was in the hands of the experts. But now I would like to bring Anisha back because Anisha, I want to ask you, your first of all, your story is so compelling. Why did you participate in the storytelling campaign?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Erica. So I've been having a lot of conversations, especially in the past couple months, about getting registered to vote, what's going to motivate me and other people to get to the polls. And I think for many of us who tune in every 4 years, it can feel like everything is about the top of the ticket. And so if you don't live in one of the swing states, um, what's your reason for actually getting out and going to the polls? So I really wanted to have a clean narrative that I felt comfortable, that I felt practiced, and that I really felt empowered by to communicate to people why I think getting to the polls is so important, and that it comes back to what is the local impact of the initiatives that are on my ballot? What is the impact of the representatives that I'm going to be supporting who are going to be making change here in my own community?
Yeah, and one of the things that I have read is that telling your own story is empowering, like you just said, that it can actually impact your emotional health, your mental health. How did it feel to tell your story?
At first, I was a little bit nervous. It took a few takes. It was only me and my dog at home, but I still did get a little bit jittery. But the toolkit that we went over in the workshop that Gnora was talking about, it really clearly walks you through how to build your narrative to something that feels very true, almost deep down inside you. So it really was just a matter of bringing those pieces out and being able to more clearly communicate them. And overall, I do feel like even outside that video, as I'm having these conversations with family and friends, or even some colleagues, that I know how to convey exactly why I'm so motivated in a way that's clear and understandable, and that really just kicks off a conversation.
Right. So you're finding even as just a communication strategy to help empower you to have these conversations. Yeah. And so what outcomes do you hope that'll happen? Like what are the outcomes you hope you hope that your story will achieve?
Yeah, I think on the day to day, I hope that it keeps the people around me open to having these conversations, especially about local initiatives. And in the long run, I hope that this also has a broader impact on colleagues or people who are not in my personal circle, who have not yet made the link between how civic action ties to public health more specifically. So I think a lot of this is, making sure that there's a conversation starter, so that we can really trade back and forth and understand more deeply how this is relevant to our work together.
Yeah. And how do you plan to share it? How do you plan to share your story?
I don't have a lot of personal social media, so I'm going to be sharing it on LinkedIn so my colleagues see it, and then I'm actually just going to be sharing it through my own messaging channels with family and friends. I think they're probably tired of reading my very long text messages and emails, so this might be a different way to keep the conversation going.
I love that. I actually like that idea. Yeah. Cool way to share why you want to vote, even with family and friends. Here, watch this video. Well, anyway, thank you, Anisha, for sharing your experience and how that felt while you were doing that. And for those of you in our audience, you may want to participate in this storytelling campaign. I highly encourage you to do it. So we're going to make sure that you have access to that storytelling toolkit so you can craft your story. And as Nora said, they'll be sharing your stories, and you now have a tool that you can share within your own networks as well. So look forward to that. And hey, drop us a note here at CHRNR if you actually do create a story. I would love to read about that. So let us know. So with that, I'm going to pause and check in with Joanne to see what questions may have come up.
Thanks, Erica. And I just want to give special thanks to Anisha and Nora because the tools that were shared have really gotten people excited and motivated just by glance at the chat and the Q&A box. And please, audience, we promise we will get you all of the links to the toolkit and all of the wonderful resources and references in the resource guide that should be posted on the CHR and our webinar by the end of this week. So there is one question, Erica, that I wanted to bring to Nora, and it's a great one because Nora, you shared about a lot of some data and background about the relationship between voting and health. And the very insightful question is, so is it that people who vote have better health, or people in better health are more likely to vote, or both?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and one that we get often. I think that it's really both. There's, a really wide breadth of political science research that tests you know, people who are healthier vote, and we can see health as a needed resource to voting. So when we, have health, when we are healthy people, it's easier to get yourself to the polls to cast a ballot. It's easier to navigate the voting process and have that on top of mind. So it's definitely true that healthier people vote. But the opposite is also being shown in more recent evidence, which I discussed earlier, where we're looking at the voting policies and those being associated with health. And so when we enable our communities to participate, we can inform the health context and condition and the social determinants of health and the conditions that make us healthier through, an inclusive representative democracy. And so to us, the pattern is really clear. But with social science evidence, we are always dealing with associations and correlations. And I'm excited to see what, the future of this research looks like.
Yeah, it sounds like though there's a strong feeling like there could be two-way benefits, which is great.
Yeah.
I just want to point out to a very insightful comment that another poster put in the Q&A box, and that was around the issue that Election Day is currently not a national holiday, that everybody across the country is not currently able to have time off for that. And so I think this is a wonderful opportunity for folks to contact their legislators and try to get that pushed through so that folks truly have equal access to voting. All right, Erica. Well, I'm not seeing any other outstanding questions in the Q&A box.
No worries. Thank you so much for answering that question, Nora. And I want to share some additional information about what works for health. And now, some of you've heard about what works for health because you are familiar with CHRNR, but it's an online tool to help you find policies and programs and system changes that affect factors that we know make communities healthier places to live. And there are over 400 policies and programs in what works for health. And you heard Nora talk about some of the strategies. Like, we know that when people register to vote, they're more likely to vote. Well, we know that because there are strategies right there, what works for health, that actually shows us that. So check out these two strategies. They're both scientifically supported to help you as you think about ways to motivate voter participation in your communities. Of course, we're going to include the links to these strategies in your resource guide. And be sure to complete a brief survey that Colleen is chatting out now. We love to hear from you. It helps us improve our webinars. Is one of the best ways that you can learn. We learn from you rather about what you want to hear about and what you want to learn about. And I want to invite you to join us next month. So next month in October, we're going to take you a little bit behind the curtain here at CHRNR. We're going to be talking about what's at the heart of the tools that we create to help you advance equity in your communities. What is our thought process? What are we thinking about when we create those tools and how we put them out? So you're going to hear from my colleagues, Christine Muganda and Angela Acker. We will also be joined by Wyatt Beckman from the Kansas Health Institute, and he's going to share how they are using our tools to improve health across the state of Kansas. Now, again, just want to remind you about that discussion group that we're going to have following the webinar to unpack what you hear today. So again, please plan to join the discussion with us. Nora will be there with us, and Joanne facilitates. You all know it's very engaging and does give you opportunity to learn from and learn with others and share with others. So Colleen's chatting out that link right now. And don't forget to stay in touch with us. There's multiple ways that you can learn about our upcoming webinars, our new What Works for Health strategies, our podcast series, etc. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter if you have not done that. We also have a presence on social media, on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'll see you in the discussion group. Thank you for everything you do to build equity in your communities, and I will see you next month.